There are days when you do nothing, not because you're lazy, not because you lack discipline or ambition or drive, but because something inside you has quietly, completely run out. You lie on the couch, you stare at the ceiling, you scroll without reading. You exist in a kind of suspended stillness that looks, from the outside, like you've given up. But here's what almost no one understands. You haven't given up. You're repairing. For weeks, maybe months, you've been moving through the world in performance mode. Smiling when you didn't feel like it. Showing up when you were already empty. Translating every thought, every feeling, every response into something socially acceptable. You've been holding it together, keeping pace, playing the role, nodding through conversations that drained you, pretending to care about things that felt meaningless, forcing yourself to be present in spaces where you felt like a stranger. And now, finally alone, finally still, your nervous system is doing what it's been trying to do for weeks. Shut down everything non-essential and focus entirely on repair. This isn't laziness. This is survival. The world calls it doing nothing. But your body, your mind, your soul, they know better. They know that stillness isn't emptiness, that rest isn't the same as giving up, that sometimes the most important thing you can do is stop doing anything at all, and yet you feel guilty, because you've been taught that your worth is measured by your productivity, by how much you accomplish, by how busy you are, how visible, how useful. You've been taught that rest is something you earn, and only after you've done enough to deserve it. But what if that's wrong? What if rest isn't a reward for productivity, but a requirement for being human? What if the stillness you're experiencing right now isn't a sign that something's broken, but a sign that something's finally trying to heal? Jung understood this deeply. He wrote about the necessity of withdrawal, the times when the psyche pulls inward, away from the noise of the outer world, to do the invisible work of integration and healing. He called it a descent, a necessary retreat into the depths, not because something is broken, but because something is being rebuilt. He said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And that process doesn't happen in constant motion. It doesn't happen while you're performing, producing, pushing. It happens in the stillness, in the moments when you stop trying to be anything for anyone and finally give yourself permission to just be. Jung believed that the psyche has its own intelligence, its own rhythm, its own way of healing itself when we finally stop interfering. And sometimes that healing requires us to do absolutely nothing. To stop managing, stop controlling, stop trying to force ourselves back into motion before we're ready. The psyche knows what it needs, and when it needs rest, it will take it, whether you give permission or not. Let me tell you about a period in my own life that I didn't understand until years later. I was in my early 30s. I had just left a job that had drained me for years, not because the work was hard, but because it required me to be someone I wasn't. Enthusiastic, extroverted, always on. Every morning, I'd put on the mask. Every evening, I'd come home and collapse. And for a while after I left, I did nothing. I mean truly nothing. I didn't look for a new job right away. I didn't start a project. I didn't fill my calendar with plans or goals or the next big thing. I just stopped. I'd wake up late, sit with coffee for hours, stare out the window, read books I'd been meaning to read for years, but never had the energy to absorb. I'd take long walks with no destination, sit in parks and watch people pass by, let my mind wander without trying to direct it anywhere. I felt guilty the entire time. My friends would ask what I was doing with my life. My family would hint that maybe I should get back out there, and I'd feel this tightness in my chest, this sense that I was failing, that I was wasting precious time, that I should be doing something, building something, moving forward. Everyone around me seemed to be climbing, achieving, progressing, and I was just sitting, existing, doing nothing that could be measured or explained or justified. but my body wouldn't let me do anything else. Every time I tried to push myself back into motion, I'd hit a wall. Not a physical wall, an emotional one. A deep, quiet resistance that said, "Not yet." And so I waited. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, without me noticing, something shifted. The fog lifted. The heaviness eased. The part of me that had been running on fumes for years finally started to feel solid again. I didn't realize it at the time, but I wasn't doing nothing. I was recovering from years of living in a way that didn't fit who I actually was. I was letting my nervous system recalibrate, letting my mind stop performing, letting my soul remember what it felt like to exist without a script. I was repairing. And that repair took months of what looked, to everyone else, like absolutely nothing. Here's what makes this so hard for people like you. You've spent most of your life in a state of low-grade overstimulation, not because you're constantly busy, not because your life is chaotic or loud, but because simply existing in the world as a sensitive, introspective person requires constant adaptation. Every conversation you have to navigate, every social expectation you have to meet, every moment you spend translating your inner world into something the outer world can accept, it all costs you something. And most of the time, you don't even notice the cost. You just keep going, keep adapting, keep performing, until one day you can't anymore. This is what burnout actually is, not the dramatic kind where you collapse at your desk or have a breakdown in public, but the quiet kind, the kind where you just stop, where getting out of bed feels like lifting a mountain, where the thought of answering a text message makes you want to cry, where doing anything beyond the absolute bare minimum feels impossible, and the world looks at you and sees laziness. But what's actually happening is this. Your system has finally said enough. It's forcing you to stop, to rest, to do the repair work you've been postponing for months, maybe years. And that work doesn't look productive. It looks like nothing. But here's what's actually happening beneath the surface. Your nervous system is down-regulating. It's moving out of the constant state of low-level stress it's been operating in and finally allowing itself to rest. Your mind is processing all those conversations you didn't have time to think about, all those emotions you didn't have space to feel, all those experiences you moved through without fully absorbing. They're finally getting processed. Your body is releasing tension you didn't even know you were holding. Tension in your jaw, your shoulders, your chest. Tension that's been there so long you stopped noticing it. And your soul, the part of you that knows who you are beneath all the performance, is finally getting space to breathe, to remember, to reconnect with what actually matters to you. This is repair, and it doesn't happen quickly. It doesn't happen on a schedule. It doesn't happen because you decide it should. It happens when your system is ready, when it's had enough time, enough stillness, enough permission to do what it needs to do. Rilke wrote about this beautifully. He said that there are times in life when we must go inward, when we must stop producing, stop performing, stop trying to make something of ourselves, and simply allow the invisible work of becoming to happen in the dark. He compared it to a seed in winter. To the outside world, the seed looks dead, dormant, like nothing is happening. But beneath the surface, in the quiet and the stillness, everything is happening. Roots are forming, strength is building, life is preparing itself for the moment when it will finally break through the soil. But that moment can't be rushed, and it can't happen without the stillness. Rilke wrote, "Perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us act, just once, with beauty and courage. Perhaps everything that frightens us is, in its deepest essence, something helpless that wants our love. And sometimes, what wants our love is our own need to rest, our own need to stop, to be still, to do nothing while everything inside us heals. This is what your doing nothing actually is. It's not laziness. It's not failure. It's not proof that you're broken or unmotivated or wasting your life. It's your soul in winter, dormant on the surface, but alive, active, rebuilding in the depths. And the more you fight it, the longer it takes. Because your system doesn't just need rest, it needs permission to rest. It needs you to stop treating stillness like a problem to be solved and start recognizing it for what it is, a necessary part of the cycle. Here's the part most people completely miss. Rest isn't the opposite of productivity, it's the foundation of it. You can't create, think, connect, or grow from a place of depletion. You can't show up as your full self when you're running on empty. And you can't repair what's broken while you're still in motion. The stillness isn't wasted time. It's the time when your system is doing the deep, invisible work that makes everything else possible. Think about it. Every creative person, every deep thinker, every artist or writer or philosopher you admire, they all had periods of dormancy. Periods where they weren't producing anything, where they were just existing, wandering, sitting, staring. And those periods weren't wasted. They were essential, because that's when the real work was happening. The invisible work, the work of integration, of digestion, of allowing everything they'd absorbed to settle and transform into something new. Darwin spent years in relative isolation after his voyage. Einstein had long periods of apparent inactivity between breakthroughs. Virginia Woolf wrote about the necessity of empty time, time when nothing seems to be happening, but everything is germinating. The world celebrates the output, but the output is impossible without the dormancy. But here's where it gets tricky, because there is a difference between rest and collapse, between repair and resignation, between your soul healing itself and your soul slowly giving up. And if you've been in the stillness for a long time, you might start to wonder, which one is this? Am I healing? Or am I hiding? Am I resting? Or am I running away? Am I in repair? Or am I in retreat? Let me offer you some distinctions, because this matters. Because the line between healthy solitude and destructive isolation can be thin, and it's important to know which side you're on. Repair versus resignation. Repair feels heavy, but not hopeless. You're tired, but somewhere beneath the exhaustion, there's a quiet sense that this is temporary, that you're waiting for something to shift. You might not know when it will shift, you might not be able to force it, but you can feel that it's coming. Resignation feels numb. There's no waiting, no sense of anything coming, just a flat, grey endlessness. It's the difference between winter and death. Winter is dormant but alive. Death is just gone. Rest versus avoidance. Rest is when you're not doing anything because your system genuinely needs to stop. You're not running from something, you're recovering from something. You might still feel anxious, you might still feel guilty, but beneath that, there's a sense that this rest is necessary, that your body is asking for it. Avoidance is when you're not doing anything because you're afraid. Afraid of failing, afraid of being seen, afraid of what happens if you try and it doesn't work. It's not that you need rest, it's that you're hiding from something you don't want to face. Stillness versus stagnation. Stillness has a quality of presence. Even if you're not moving, you're still there, still aware, still connected to yourself. You might be lying on the couch, but you're noticing things, feeling things, thinking things. You're still engaged with your inner world, even if you're not engaged with the outer one. Stagnation feels like disappearing, like you're not really present in your own life anymore, like you're just floating, numb, disconnected from everything, including yourself. If you're in repair, you'll know, because even though you're not doing anything visible, you can feel something happening inside. A slow softening, a gradual return of energy, a quiet sense that you're coming back to yourself. It might take weeks, it might take months, but you'll feel it. Like the first warm day after a long winter. like the moment you realize you can breathe a little deeper than you could yesterday. And when you do, you won't have to force yourself back into motion. You'll just move. Not because you should, not because you're trying to prove something, but because you're ready. Because the repair is done, the roots are strong, and your system is finally ready to grow again. The Stoics had a phrase for this: otium. It's a Latin word that doesn't translate cleanly into English, but it means something like purposeful rest or productive stillness. It's the idea that there are times when the most important work you can do is invisible. When you're not building or creating or achieving anything the world can see, but you're doing the deep inner work that makes all of that possible. Seneca wrote, "True peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of inner clarity." And that clarity doesn't come from constant motion. It comes from stillness, from silence, from the willingness to stop and let your soul catch up with your body. The Stoics understood that a life lived entirely in motion is a life lived on the surface, and that the deepest, most important work happens when we finally stop moving long enough to listen, to hear what our bodies are telling us, to feel what our souls are asking for, to notice what we've been running from or running toward. So if you're in one of those periods right now where you're doing nothing, where you feel guilty, where you're wondering if you're broken or lazy or wasting your life, let me tell you what's actually happening. You're not broken. You're not lazy. You're not wasting anything. You're in repair. Your nervous system is recalibrating after months or years of overstimulation. Your mind is processing everything you didn't have time to process while you were in motion. Your soul is doing the invisible work of integration, taking all the fragments of who you've been and slowly, quietly, weaving them back together. And that work takes time. It takes stillness. It takes the courage to do nothing while the world tells you that doing nothing is failure. This doesn't mean you should stay in the stillness forever. It doesn't mean you should avoid life or hide from challenges, or use rest as an excuse to never try anything again. But it does mean you need to stop treating rest like the enemy. Stop forcing yourself to move before you're ready. Stop measuring your worth by how productive you are. Stop believing that stillness is the same as stagnation. Because here's the truth. The version of you that emerges from this period of rest, the one who's had time to repair, to recalibrate, to remember who they are beneath all the performance, that version is stronger than the one who was running on empty. More grounded, more clear, more capable of showing up as their full self. But only if you let the repair happen. Only if you stop fighting the stillness and start trusting it. Jung said that the descent into the depths is not a sign of failure. It's a sign that you're ready to become something more than you were. And that becoming doesn't happen in the noise. It doesn't happen in constant motion or endless productivity or the performance of being fine. It happens in the quiet, in the moments when you're doing nothing and everything at the same time. So if you're lying on the couch right now, staring at the ceiling, feeling guilty for not doing more, stop. You're not doing nothing, you're repairing. And that repair, it's the most important work you'll ever do, because without it, you can't create, you can't connect, you can't grow. Without it, you're just running on empty, performing a version of life instead of actually living it. But with it, with the stillness, the rest, the permission to do nothing, you're building something real, something solid, something true. You're building yourself back. And if you've ever wondered how to tell the difference between resting and slowly giving up on life, between repair and resignation, between stillness and stagnation, that's a different kind of question, one that unfolds in the next quiet conversation. Alone together, a quiet corner of the internet for people who choose solitude over half-hearted connections.